Okay, so our pieces have been quietly rusting for about 30 hours now. Let's take a look and see what they look like. I'll remove some of the weights that I had on top of them. Grabbed a couple of my little tubs or buckets to put the pieces back into. And so I'll just start taking the pieces off, the rusty metal off. As you can see, I've got some really, really great impressions here. So I think this will be a good piece. Now this first piece is a small fabric. I'm not sure what it was, but it's a cotton fabric. And as you can see, I have a small breeze out here this morning. I hope it's not interfering too much with the audio. So now I have a bucket of fresh water behind me. I would just go ahead and put these pieces in the water as I take a look at them. But this is great. There's some really great marks on this piece. And now the denim. This is the rusty can lid, and this is from the side that's facing up. And the beauty of rust is you get a different look on each side. So that's the rusty can lid on the other side. Okay, this is the sleeve from that silk garment that I purchased. And I didn't cut this piece apart. I just left it as a sleeve. And you see, I got some really great marks on this. This is the piece of linen that I have in my stash that I want to make some garments out of. I'm very pleased with this. This is the baby wipe, and you see how well that rusted. The other baby wipe, look at this. This is from that small paint can lid. That's what it looks like on one side. And this is what it looks like on another side, on the other side. This is the third baby wipe. This is the natural colored cotton, the same as that blue piece. That did very, very well. And here's our cotton muslin. As usual, this rusted very nicely. This is another piece of that natural colored cotton. As you can see, that rusted very nicely. And this is the blue piece of cotton. Now this is our final layered piece. This is the heavyweight cotton duck. And remember, I told you that this does rust beautifully, and you can see how beautiful it is. So that's the side that was face up. And this is the side that was face down. Now these are all the layered pieces. I will take a minute and clean off the table, and I'll be back in just a minute, and we will unveil the wrapped pieces. Okay, so now let's take a look at the pieces of fabric that we wrapped around the rusty metal objects. Let's start with this bundle first. Here's one of the small pieces I wrapped around an Allen wrench. And it doesn't look like it's done much. So I will wrap this piece back up and leave it sit for another day or two. Now remember, I said earlier in the previous segment that the amount of time it takes will depend on a lot of things. So you just really never know. You just have to put it out there and let it and see what happens. This is the baby wipe, and this rusted very nicely. This is one of those thin pieces of cotton, just some scrap that I like to rust. They're great for accent pieces. And this one did pretty good. I will call this one done. There's still a little bit here, so maybe I'll wrap it again. Okay, this is that paper toweling. Let's see if I can get it off here without tearing it. And I will not be soaking this in water. I will just quickly dunk it into the water to rinse it off. But look at that. The rusting and the marbling complement each other so nicely. This is a piece of that natural colored cotton, the same as the blue piece that we layered earlier. Just a piece of thin cotton, muslin weight. And this was the other sleeve from that silk garment. This time I did open it up. And look at what we got. Look at this. This one is kind of lightly rusted for this piece. I may decide to re-rust this. We'll see. I'm not sure. Now this is the piece of what I think is silk, but I don't know. It didn't do much. So I will try this piece again. This is a piece of cotton muslin. And this is another piece of my favorite linen. Really like how I rolled this one on the diagonal. Instead of straight up and down marks, I have some diagonal marks. So overall, I say that the rusting session was a success. So I have these pieces soaking in some water, and I will leave them soaking for a few hours, and then I will change out the water to some fresh water. And then I will do that several times throughout the day or the next few days. And on the final bucket rinsing, I will add some baking soda, about a half a cup of baking soda to a gallon of water. And I will let that sit for several hours, and then they will get a cycle through the washing machine. If I have a lot of heavily rusted pieces, I will do a second rinse in the washing machine, adding baking soda and letting it sit for a half hour to an hour before finally rinsing out. Now I do wash these in a washer, but I don't use my regular washing machine. Since I do so much rusting, I really am afraid I may damage my machine. I don't know if it will, it's just a fear of mine. Plus, for my rental apartment, I have everything is white sheets, white slip covers, and I don't want to risk transferring rust to all of that white. So I purchased a used washer on Craigslist, and my husband hooked it up to the same washer hookup, and that's what I use for all of my surface design work, all of my rusting, dyeing, indigo. That way I don't risk any damage to my machine. Now my regular machine is just a regular one. It's not one of those high efficiency ones. I don't know anything about those machines, so if you have one of those, you'll have to do the research on your own to see if you'll feel comfortable washing this rusted material in your washer. I would be a little cautious. To me, it was worth the $80 to go out and buy a second-hand machine and not have to worry or take the risk of damaging my machine or transferring rust to any items I don't want to transfer it to. So go ahead and let your pieces soak. The first rinse water will be very rusty, and in the next segment I'll give you some ideas on how to use that rusty water, and also I will tell you how to safely dispose of this rusty water. After rinsing your fabrics, you will have rusty wastewater you will need to dispose of. Now the first rinsing will be very heavily contaminated, and that's a great starter for your rusty soaking solution. But if you do a lot of natural dyeing with rust, eventually you will get to the point where you can't save all that and will need to dispose of it. Try to figure out environmentally friendly ways to dispose of this rusty wastewater. What I do is I take my bucket of water and I pour about a third of it into a second bucket and dilute that second bucket with fresh water. And then I feel comfortable pouring that on a weed patch near my yard and letting the natural filtration of the ground soil take care of it. So I continue to dilute it and then pour it on the weed patch. For the less heavily contaminated buckets of rust water, I just dilute those in the same manner and pour those down the drain. Now if you have a septic system, you will need to do some research to see what, if any, a higher iron content will do to your system. But try to recycle as much of the rusty wastewater as you can, and for what you can't, try to find an environmentally friendly way to dispose of it. But do not pour this water on your favorite plants. Higher iron content can be detrimental to plants, so don't put this on your favorite roses. Earlier in this segment, I mentioned that I use a separate washer for my fabrics that I dye and rust. I don't want to transfer stains from these fabrics to other items. Now I had to get really creative to find a space for this washer, as there's no room in my laundry room. I ended up putting it outside. Now that's not as bad as it seems, because above my garage studio We have a small apartment, and these are the stairs leading up to the apartment. And I was able to place the washer in this nook under the stairs, and it's pretty well protected. We actually had a heavy rain last night with heavy winds, and it barely got wet. And this is the view from the other side, and just behind that wall is the laundry room, and my husband was able to drill a hole into the wall to run the plumbing for this washer. It shares the drain with my normal washer. And just behind the washer, there's an outdoor faucet, so I was able to run the water hookup from that faucet to this washer. So this works very well for me. But if you decide you need a separate washer, you may have to get creative to find space for it. Or if you don't do a lot of rust-dyed fabrics, you may not need one. Okay, so all of the pieces have been rinsed, neutralized, and washed. And I also ran them through a second rinse cycle in the washer. So at this point, we're ready to press our fabrics. And while I'm pressing them, I also take a very good look at them to see if I need to do any more rusting. Sometimes the pieces don't come out with as much rust as I'd like. In that case, I will rust them again. So I don't use an iron with steam, so I just spray it down with water. And you notice I have a press cloth on the table. And then I would just press over the fabric, using whatever temperature I need to use for that particular fabric. So this fabric is the first piece that I laid down in the layering process, and you can see the outlines of the saw blades. And this is what it looks like from one side, and you get a totally different look on the second side. Now this is a piece of the muslin, and this piece was actually too large and I had to fold it, and this is probably where it was folded because you can see there's a little bit of a wider area there. So I'll just spray this piece down. So this is what this piece looks like from one side and from the other side. I have a few more pieces to press, but while I'm doing that, I do want to go over one more time the rinsing and neutralizing process. After I unbundle everything, I put everything in a bucket of water to soak for several hours. That first rinse will have a high iron content, and you can use that as a starter solution for your rusty water, or you can dispose of it as I explained earlier, in which I will explain again. And then I rinse it several more times until the water is almost clear. The final bucket rinse before I wash it, I add about 1/2 cup of baking soda to a gallon of water and let it sit again for several hours. I then run it through a regular wash and sometimes a second rinse if necessary, with additional baking soda in the second rinse water. And now to dispose of the rusty wastewater, I dilute it very heavily with water, and then I will pour it on a weed patch near my yard. The lightly rusted solutions, I dilute them and then I dispose of them down the drain. Again, if you have a septic system, you will need to research and see what type of problems that may or may not cause you. So this is the piece of denim. This is one of the baby wipes. And when you press the baby wipes, you do want to use a lower temperature on your iron. A high temperature will just melt this fabric because it's mostly polyester. I have to say I do love the way the baby wipes take the rust. So this is what the baby wipe looks like. And I do have several other baby wipes, and I will show you those along with the other pieces of fabrics from this video session in a slideshow coming up soon.